Okay. Thought rather than watch a video, we might ask some questions. And I wanted to ask first, has anybody yet watched Elder Terry's studies on the mark of the beast? I'm hoping to have a good, wide open discussion with a lot of mics on, maybe, or chat. Troy's watched, Donna's watched, Christine not yet. Too many in front of it. Yeah, I hear that. Um, Sarah watched part one. Just kind of want to get an idea of where we're at. And Jackie said it's been a while. She just posted these ones just posted, I think, Jackie. Um, and it's not yet. Okay. I have some questions that I put on the board that we'll kind of look at a few topics. And so we'll pull the spotlight on there and we'll go through it. Some of the board is for another study, but we'll go through my first. I think I want to start over here. When we enter into a dispensation, what happens? When we enter into a new dispensation, what happens?
A
We'll get a new
message opens
message.
up.
Val, then was it Christine or
Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
Well, I said a message opens up.
message opens up? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, Christine,
I said a new message.
a new message, same thing. Okay, so a
Yeah.
message arrives, right? Then what happens next?
Increase of knowledge. So the knowledge increases
On what? The knowledge increases on what?
on the message that opened up.
On the message that opened up. And then in the formalization, what happens?
It's solid. Like as the increase of knowledge, things are still we're still trying to understand it, but at the formalization, it's solid. It's this way and that's the way it goes. Kind of,
You know what
I
it
don't know how to
is.
explain it.
Yeah. You know what it is. Made clear, Sarah said. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, it's established.
Okay.
Yes,
So then what happens after that?
we're tested on it.
You tested on it. So,
So, well, we start getting tested on it at the formalization, but our test is handed back to us. So for we actually pass our test in, and we either pass or fail. But we start the test at the formalization, right? That's what I'm understanding.
yes. Yes. Does everybody understand that? So you have a message that arrives. So 1989, you had a message that arrived, and that was the opening up of line upon line. You have a increase of knowledge on that, Daniel 11:40 to 45. Then you have the formalization, which is the Time magazine, and then you have a test. And maybe if we have time, I want to relook at 1989 to 2001, but I want to focus on the Sunday law history. So if anybody has been rereading recently, like the Loud Cry chapter in early writings, right? And I'm not sure what it's called in Great Controversy. Um, if anybody has, maybe give a summary, a quick synopsis, is that the right word? I'm the uneducated one here, of the Loud Cry message. Is anybody familiar with the chapter?
I am familiar with it. I read it just a week or so ago, and I have to refresh my mind again, though, with the actual sequence of events.
Anybody that was in rescue in 2017, that was that first time Elder Parminder came. Tyler was there. And I always remember him saying that eraser follows behind him all the time. And it's like, yeah, that's certainly happens to all of us. It happens to me all the time that an eraser follows behind me, trying to remember things. So in that chapter, maybe we'll it's a short chapter in early writings. How about if we read through it quickly, and then we'll go from there. So give me just 1 second. I'll line it up, and then we'll read it. And anybody has any comments? We haven't done much, but if you have any comments, feel free to talk right now while I'm searching.
This morning we got into a good discussion too, so I'm liking what you're, opening up for us. I don't know how many people watched the Bible study, but when I woke up this morning, I unplugged my phone and I always check my messages, and I noticed 52 comments in Bible study. So of course I hit on it just to see, wow, they must be something that they're talking about. And yeah, they were really trying to figure out democracy,
Yeah.
because it's so complex. And some people thought of democracy as being equality.
Excuse me.
Right. Anyway, it's very interesting because we're beginning, just like this, what you're going to do now, we're beginning to really look deeper than we did before.
Do you want to start with reading? Read the first paragraph, Susan?
Well, I guess I could, sure.
Thank you.
I saw angels hurrying to and fro in heaven, descending to the earth, and again ascending to heaven, preparing for the fulfillment of some important event. Then I saw another mighty angel commissioned to descend to the earth, to unite his voice with the third angel and give power and force to his message. Great power and glory were imparted to the angel, and as he descended, the earth was lightened with his glory. The light which attended this angel penetrated everywhere, as he cried mightily with a strong voice, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. The message of the fall of Babylon, as given by the second angel, is repeated, with the additional mention of the corruptions which have been entering the churches since 1844. The work of this angel comes in at the right time to join in the last great work of the third angel's message as it swells to a loud cry. And the people of God are thus prepared to stand in the hour of temptation, which they are soon to meet. I saw a great light resting upon them, and they united to fearlessly proclaim the angel's message.
Third angel's message. Thank you. So I don't think we have to guess it too much here, because Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen. It identifies the mighty angel that comes to add their voice to the third angel, and that message being that Babylon is fallen, is the work of the second angel. It says it right in there, that the message as given by the second angel. So we know that you have the third angel's message, and the second angel comes and adds power, or from what we witnessed from the midnight cry, adds clarity to the message. Is that fair to say? Can somebody add to that or clarify if I missed anything? I'm sure I missed a lot. So what time period would you say we're in here?
Well,
Prior to the
well,
loud cry.
Loud cry, go ahead, Phil.
um, Loud cry, I would say between Sunday law and close of probation.
Yeah, and Sarah put Sunday law. Okay. Okay, so somebody want to read the next paragraph? Right here.
I'll read.
Okay.
Angels were sent to aid the mighty angel from heaven, and I heard voices which seemed to sound everywhere. Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. This message seemed to be an addition to the third message. Joining it as the midnight cry joined the second angel's message in 1844. The glory of God rested upon the patient waiting saints, and they fearlessly gave the last solemn warning, proclaiming the fall of Babylon and calling upon God's people to come out of her, that they might escape her fearful doom.
Okay, so she's saying that this message is like the midnight cry that came in 1844. So I think if we were to look, hope I'm right in saying this, at that as being the alpha, she's giving what the omega. Well, I don't think at the time she would have looked at it as the omega. She only saw one history, and she talks about it as one history, and we see it as two histories, as an alpha and omega. So as an omega, then we would repeat that alpha history. So we would have a midnight cry and then a loud cry. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
Okay. So, and I don't remember where, maybe it was recent. I've been in so many different videos, but the Elder Parmenter says that the midnight cry is synonymous with the loud cry. That the midnight cry is the loud cry. But you do have, in an alpha history, you have one call to the church and then one call to the world. And in omega history, you have two calls to the church and one call to the world. So this would, I think we're all in agreement that this would be, this loud cry is the Sunday law to close of probation. Is there anybody that is not in agreement with that? I think we all are.
Is there a different interpretation of that I'm not aware of? When you
About,
ask
about
the
whether,
question, I guess I thought that's what we all thought. But when you asked that, I wondered if there was another view.
no, that's how I see it.
Okay.
That the midnight cry and the loud cry, as Elder Parmenter taught, they're synonymous, and that the midnight cry is really just the loud cry. But you have a loud cry, or you had a loud cry in our line, gave clarity on the message, but it wasn't a literal close of probation. And this is the one that goes to the world, and it's a literal close of probation. So would somebody like to read the next paragraph?
Well, I could read again if nobody wants to read.
Okay.
Okay. The light that was shed upon the waiting ones penetrated everywhere. And those in the churches who had any light, who had not heard and rejected the three messages, obeyed the call and left the fallen churches. Many had come to years of accountability since these messages had been given, and the light shone upon them, and they were privileged to choose life or death. Some chose life and took their stand with those who were looking for their Lord and keeping all his commandments, all their commandments. The third message was to do its work. All were to be tested upon it, and the previous ones were to be called out from the religious bodies. A compelling power moved the honest, while the manifestation of the power of God brought a fear and restraint upon their unbelieving relatives and friends, so that they dared not, neither had they the power to, hinder those who felt the work of the Spirit of God upon them. The last call was carried even to the poor slaves, and the pious among them poured forth their songs of rapturous joy at the prospect of their happy deliverance. Their masters could not check them. Fear and astonishment kept them silent. Mighty miracles were wrought, the sick were healed, and signs and wonders followed the believers. God was in the work, and every saint, fearless of consequences, followed the conviction of it of their own conscience, and united with those who were keeping all the commandments of God. And with power they sounded abroad the third message. I saw that this message will close with power and strength, far exceeding the midnight cry.
I think we're all comfortable with the fact that Sunday law is equality, or inequality, and that you could read this. We don't really have the time to go through it. You'd have to do it on your own and look at this and put it together in a way that depicts patriarchy and the juxtapositioning of hate and love coming side by side and this message going out. Okay, so I'll read the last one. Servants of God endowed with power from on high, with their faces lighted up and shining with holy consecration, went forth to proclaim the message from heaven. Souls that were scattered all through the religious bodies had bodies answered to the call, and the precious were hurried out of the doomed churches. We could also look at this knowing that this is about culture, because religion, great decline in religion, it wouldn't affect the world. So you have the world here in culture. So let's see. And answered the call, and the precious were hurried out of the doomed churches as Lot was hurried out of Sodom before her destruction. God's people were strengthened by the excellent glory which rested upon them in rich abundance and prepared them to endure the hour of temptation. I heard everywhere a multitude of voices saying, here's the patience of the saints, here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. I'm thinking that this chapter is one that I wanted to read as well, but for now, we'll go quick up to the board. And it might be that next chapter. And I can't remember if I was in the Great Controversy or in early writings. I think I've probably read both recently. But one of them where it goes on, and maybe somebody's familiar with this we can decide where it's at. But where it goes on and says that no one is tested on the mark of the beast without first hearing clearly and understanding what the issue is, and then they're tested. Does that sound familiar? Anybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Sounds familiar. So I just wanted to kind of glean through here real quick, because it might have been in a Great Controversy that I was reading that. But so they are, no one will be tested that hasn't had the opportunity to have heard it and then reject it. So if we go to the history that we're in, depending on, I think everybody's in agreement now that we're at least in Sunday law, where it began, where the actual waymark is the question that's happening. So looking at 1844, there was a cry that went to the people, and she says to all the churches at that time, and we know that they did not look at politics and didn't look at the outside world. So a message comes, swells to a cry, and people could escape. So you have this message of this mighty angel, which we know Revelation 18 is Revelation 18, and comes in to join the third angel's message, just like we just read, and add power to the third angel's message. So what is the third angel's message in a word or two? I think you could do it in a word or two. I mean, I know it's a whole big package, but
Patriarchy and equality.
yeah. Yeah, so you're going to have a message that arrives. I almost think we have to read that chapter, but I don't know if we're going to have time to read it. And I don't remember if it was great controversy. I think it was. So in this history, what is the warning that's coming? In this history, what is the warning? What are we tested on?
It
The-
would be coming out of that system.
What is the test itself?
Yeah.
What is the test itself?
Equality?
Yeah, that's not what I'm looking for. You're gonna pass or fail. And if you fail, what happens?
That's it. You're done.
Well, how are you done? Something happens. The mark of the
Get the
beast.
mark.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
You get the mark. You get the mark of the beast, right?
Right,
So
or sealed in the forehead.
right. So you're going to get the mark of the beast or the seal of God. So if this is the mark of the beast test, right? And we might have to, I would say read before we meet on Friday, and I'm not sure we don't know the UK schedule yet, so what our schedule will be like, but read the great controversy. I'll go back after the study tonight if anybody, wants me to. I'll go back. I think it's in great controversy where it's going to talk about that. But that's what she's talking about. It's a chapter where she's talking about the mark of the beast, and nobody's going to receive the mark of the beast. Specifically, nobody's going to receive the mark of the beast until they have had a chance to hear the message, receive it, and understand it and reject or refuse. And then they would receive the mark of the beast. So that would be the test. Where does the test come? In a dispensation, where does the test come?
Formalization.
At the formalization. So is it safe to say that this is the mark of the beast test?
That's the formalization of what it is, right? What the message about the mark of the beast is. But I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So the Sunday law and the universal Sunday law, the dispensation before the Sunday law and the dispensation before the universal Sunday law. So the dispensation before the Sunday law that we just passed, I was always thinking we had to see the image of the beast because that was the great test of the people of God by which their eternal destiny would be decided. And that I still see it that way because we had to recognize the governments of this world and the way that that patriarchy is the foundational understanding across cultures, in churches, everywhere. And if you think of even the statue of that is portrayed in Daniel, that we've seen the statue many times in our Adventist studies,
There too, yeah.
right? That it's King Nebuchadnezzar, basically, right? And the head was the king, right? The Babylon. Anyway, those governments, and that it's a man, and that it's about patriarchy. It's so clearly shown to me that way, just even in the symbol that's used of the man, the image of all the kingdoms. And so to me, I was thinking that we're going to see a similar dispensation for the universal Sunday law, or how do I say? Or very similar truth to recognizing what we had to recognize before the Sunday law. Am I making sense what I'm trying to say?
I think so.
And do you see do you see?
So I would ask, let me ask the question. Do you see that as that then those that people can receive the mark of the beast here?
No,
No? Where do you see them receiving the mark of the beast?
you can't receive the mark of the beast yet because that's not the test yet. But you do have to see the image being formed before
Yes.
the actual Sunday law test. That was our test even before the Sunday law. We had to recognize the image that was being set up, the face of the Sunday law, Trump and Trumpism, and all that went into that beast image. We had to recognize that the papacy, which is the beast, was actually the image of the papacy formed by the evangelicals, or however you want to define the papacy today as it plays its role with apostate Protestantism, right?
We'll look at that in a minute too.
But so I'm just saying that it seems that the dispensation we will be in now or are in now is going to even clarify more. It's going than what it did previous. But we have all the elements, I believe, in place already from the previous dispensation. It's just a thought I've had because I can see the similarities.
Okay. So are we in agreement? Is there anybody that disagrees that the mark of the beast test begins here? Is in this period that this test is the mark of the beast test?
Are you saying that it would start at the formalization
Yeah,
before close of probation, right?
yeah. The test
Which
is
means that,
always the formalization. So I think we all agreed that a test is always at the
right.
formalization.
And like Sarah said, then that means that nobody could have been sealed or gotten the mark of the beast at the voting time because we're not in that dispensation, or we weren't in that dispensation yet because we're not at the formalization, correct?
We're not at the formalization. No.
So nobody could have received the mark of the beast or the seal of God yet.
Right.
But
Okay.
it's sort of a down payment in a way.
Oh,
Because if
sure. Yeah,
you
because
voted
all tests
for,
are built on each
right?
other, right?
Yeah. Because if you voted for the other government, then you are already setting yourself up to accept the image, right?
Sure.
So let's say
Yeah.
you voted for Trump out of ignorance, deception, or whatever the reason you voted for Trump. You thought that he was going to help you financially, economically, or what have you, and you voted for Trump, and you start to see what he's doing, and you realize what you've done. Can you repent?
I believe you can until the close of probation when Michael stands up.
Okay, so are we all understanding this test to be the mark of the beast test? That's the testing period. We know the formalization is always a test. Are we in agreement that it's the test of the mark of the beast?
I believe so.
Okay. I
Yes,
believe
I
so
agree.
too.
That's what I've
Okay.
always thought.
Here's the question is, for whom is the test?
Yeah, we'll try to cover that. We're trying to get the big broad picture here first because I have a question. If this is the mark of the beast test, what's the message that arrives?
Well, it would have to be on equality, right? Wouldn't it?
It
Anybody
would
else?
have to be a mark of the beast. It would have to do something with the mark of the beast.
Sarah says image of the beast.
Yeah, that was another question. I'm still thinking about what you said because I think I agree with both what Phil and Christine said. But
But people aren't People aren't going to start loving their neighbor just out of fear, are they? I mean, you have to love your neighbor because you love your neighbor because it's the character of God, not because you're afraid of dying.
Definitely, I'll leave God to sort that part out. But I mean, I'm sure we'd be able to see the difference. Can they get away with that? The one that makes the decision is who's safe to take to heaven. That I don't know that that's on me, but but I think we're in agreement that this is the mark of the beast test. So if this is the test, then the message that unsealed, it has to be what you're tested on, right?
Yes,
So you get an increase of knowledge on this, then
right.
here, huh?
Yes,
And then here it becomes formalized and it becomes a test. So it has to be, if this is the test, then somehow it's the message that arrives here. Whether or not that's the image, I get the image is set up. I don't know if I have that all clear in my head, but I mean, I do see obviously the image is set up. And you see that in Daniel 3, the plains of Dura. The image is set up, and then you're tested on it. So the image is set up. You're going to have an increase of knowledge on that image, and then you're going to be tested. And then you have Daniel 12:1. Is there anybody that disagrees with that?
no, I agree with that.
Okay. So I have to say that oh no, I'll leave that out. I'll leave that out. So we
Are these
got
questions?
huh?
Are these questions you're asking in this particular way based on the studies from Elder Terry?
Yes, part of it, yes.
Okay, so I might be misunderstanding, so I need to watch the presentations first before I can answer these questions because I need to understand what she's talking about.
You answered well. But it's also to do with all the messages that are being shared, because various things are being said in different messages. And I myself I'm not going to watch all of everybody's because I don't have the time. Probably you don't either, but if you do, great. But I am watching Terry's, trying to backtrack a little bit to go to Terry's, but I just watched her recent ones on the mark of the beast. And I'll leave that part at that. So we have a message that arrives, an increase of knowledge on that message, a formalization of that message, and then a test. So that if this is the mark of the beast test, the great test to which your eternal destiny is decided, because Michael stands up and there's no more mercy, that if that's the mark of the beast test, then the message has to be on the mark of the beast or the image. Maybe it's the image. I think that might be the way it's worded. I would have to go back and really read more carefully those passages. But so you have an image set up, and it's not clear to people. You see patriarchy here, right? You see inequality, however we want to word it. We see the anti-LGBTQ, etc. And then you have the immigration, what that means, and economy. So we got the test. What is
Also abortion, too.
Yes,
Ewing.
yes. Thank you.
Mhm.
You have abortion. Yeah.
Pulling aid from helping humanity.
Say that what?
How Trump and Musk have pulled,
Oh yeah.
shut down.
Yes. And
Yeah,
fired a lot of people. A lot of people are out of work.
but also these things, those entities like USAID, they were preventing tuberculosis from getting on the rise, and they were preventing diseases by their work in other countries. And it wasn't just to feed the poor, but they were doing that too. and they've just pulled the plug on all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I think we're done with this section for now, anyways. And if you haven't and want to, it'd be good to go back and watch Elder Terry. Because there are some other things that she says. And
Were her
let's-
studies done, Elaine, just recently, you said?
yeah,
I know
the ones that I just watched were the most recent, I think. Christine, is that
that
right? They're the most
was
recent?
that February?
Yes, but you can find them all on that playlist, the Sunday Law playlist that we have on
Okay.
IPR.
Yeah.
Because I've downloaded them from all the other websites and put them on ours so that they would be easy to get to.
Yes, that was a beautiful work you did. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Troy. Said Mark of the Beast is unsealed. So you have the Mark of the Beast unsealed, or the image of the beast is now set up, and now it's out there that you have this message that's unsealed, and it's going to have an increase of knowledge formalization and then a test. And none, I think it's great controversy, but none would be tested that have not had the opportunity to hear this message and reject it.
You know,
So
we might not be being personally necessarily persecuted per se, but it has been a lot of persecution that's happened for the LGBTQ community, a lot since this all happened. And I mean, like, we're just a teenager and a father, and various people just attack someone in their apartment building or whatever now. It's like it's unleashed a behavior that,
yes.
and you, to me, that's part of the mark, because your character, you are now manifesting it through your hands, even the way you think, through your hands. I don't know. I just see that as a part of it also. Your character and how
Well,
you
maybe as
behave.
well at that where because I think it's been taught that you can seal your fate anywhere along the way. So
Yeah,
but little until Daniel 12:1, could you repent?
yeah,
Okay, so I want to go to this one. Each one of these are things that I'm hearing in Elder Terry studies. This one, and I messaged her a whole bunch of questions finally. I'm kind of on the intimidated side. I didn't want to. But somebody said, just ask her, because we're wondering and grappling these things, and what are they? So I'm going to just say that those that have not watched it, hopefully you do go back. There's 3 parts. There's a lot more in the Q&A. That's the third part that that I have a lot of questions about. One here was, and I think she says she has to go back and try to restudy it to get it more clear. But how I heard it is this discussion that the sixth kingdom is not the king of the north. Has anybody watched that? So I sent her a bunch of my questions on that. So let's take Daniel 2 real quick. We're going to read a passage here in a minute, but Daniel 2, you have I erase this. Somebody give me the rundown of the kingdoms from Daniel 2.
Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome.
And Rome, how long does Rome last?
Till now.
Till now. So let's read the passage real quick. Spotlight on. What can I find? Oh yeah, I'm in the right place. Okay, so this is, I think you can see it up here. Except I can't. Okay, an address. If anybody remembers, Elder Parmenter brought up this article for us to read a long time ago. He went through this. An address to the public and especially the clergy, section 5, the time of the end and end itself, Roman, Jewish, and Christian history. So this is just going through verse by verse. Comes up to the time of, I just kind of jumped into this at the destruction of Greece, and the four generals, and then when Rome comes on the scene. So just taking this last sentence here, if somebody wants to read it, starting with next. Right here.
I'll go ahead and read it.
Okay.
Next, we are taken back to the union first formed between the people of God, the Jews, and the Romans, the last of the four great earthly kingdoms which should exist, and which is to continue to exist until the end.
So the last of the four great earthly kingdoms, right? I'll put this in the chat so we have it. Okay, so it's the last of the four great kingdoms, which Daniel 2 gives us. And this one goes all the way till the end. So what happens when you get to Revelation 13?
You mean the two beast powers?
Yes. You have two beasts. Which one? What's the first one?
The papacy?
Go into this little section here. So you have beast number 1 equals papacy. And what's beast number 2?
The USA?
Okay. So then when you have Revelation 17, what do you see in Revelation 17? You have a beast.
The harlot?
Huh?
The harlot?
Yeah, beast riding a woman. And how many heads does the beast have?
7.
7. So this is Revelation 13. And then we're going to go to Revelation 17. And you have 7 heads. What's a head equal?
Mhm.
A
Wasn't it?
kingdom
Yeah, kingdom.
Kingdom or king?
or a king.
Yeah, I was torn between that, but I guess it could be both, right?
Yeah, the Bible defines it as both. So Daniel 2 tells us there's only 4. But when you go to Revelation, you say 7. Why?
Because it's like an amalgamation. It's where you've combined the other kingdoms with the beast power.
Anybody else? Nobody? Rome is divided into what?
It's pagan and pagan Rome.
Okay. So Rome is pagan.
Pagan, yeah.
What else?
Papacy.
Papacy.
Mm-hmm.
And what else?
Modern.
Modern.
Modern. Okay. So you have only 4 kingdoms, but one of them is going to come in 3 phases. Does everybody see that?
Yes.
So that's why you have 7 heads here. You have a head that receives a deadly wound. Which one receives the deadly wound?
The papal head.
Papal head receives a deadly wound. Is the papacy healed? Because we know that the deadly wound would be healed.
Well, yes. Through the image.
Is it
Right.
healed? Sarah says yes. Susan says yes.
Sure does seem like it.
1929.
Got a little question. Is it the papacy that's healed or the 5th head?
I would say more the 5th head, not so much
Fifth.
the papacy.
Yeah, 5th head.
Okay, so if you say the 5th head, we're going to get rid of this real quick. So this is the 5th head. So if the 5th head receives the deadly wound, then what would be healed?
The 6th head, is that what you're leading to?
This one did a particular work, right? What kind of work did this head do?
Persecution?
Yeah,
Persecution,
persecution.
church and state, right?
So then would it be I'm a little confused because I always think the 8th is of the 7th, so I'm like, would it be the 8th when it's healed completely?
I'm not quite there myself.
Okay.
The mother and the daughters are separate. We know that it's church, it's culture, not just church. Marcia says pagan Rome, Daniel 8:9, southeast, Pleasant Land, papal Holy. Now that's with pagan. What takes out pagan Rome? Modern Rome, Daniel 11:40 to 42, the south, the glorious land in Egypt. Yes. So if this was a persecuting power, where do we see a persecuting power come back?
Well, now,
Now,
yeah.
We see it in the 7th kingdom.
you see it in the 7th kingdom, which is made up of modern Rome, which is kind of interesting because then
So then
modern
the 6th
Rome,
kingdom was pagan Rome. The 7th kingdom is like the image of the beast because it's not actually the papacy anymore, but it is a beast power, right?
yeah, I have an old conflict of my own in here still too, because the modern isn't the moderns the 6th and the 7th.
Well, yes. Maybe even the 8th. Doesn't it go all the way to the end?
Yeah, I don't want to go to the 8th yet. I can't go. I don't know. But here's what I've been kind of I've been working with somebody with just that's not a Seventh-day Adventist and doing some studies, just trying to give the broad over picture, and you're going to come into conflict because Daniel 2 is only 4. Daniel 2 is 4 beasts or 4 kingdoms. But Revelation, we saw, has 7 heads, which are a head as a kingdom. So Rome makes up all of this. And we just read by Josiah Litch that it would, as it says in, I think it's in Daniel 2, 7 and 8. It might be worded different ways. I don't remember. But I've been reviewing those chapters, that we know that that fourth one would go until the end. Daniel sees that, and that fourth one is going to go until the end. So if it's not the papacy in Revelation 13 that receives the beast, we as Seventh-day Adventists, I think, always understood that beast is the papacy. Yeah, but it's still a beast. And a beast is more than just the papacy. I think that it's what the fifth head represents. Receives a deadly wound. Then begins modern Rome, the sixth head. And the sixth head fails, is the glorious land. That's a whole nother thing to go into as well.
But in order to get to the seventh, Marcia made a good point, because the papacy had to remove those powers, the hero lie,
Yes.
and
Yes.
so in order to get to the seventh, to be like a little horn and speak blasphemies against the Most High, it had to also remove the three powers.
Had to remove the south, the glorious land, and Egypt. I think I have that on the other side of my board. So it had to move.
But also, it had internally in the United States, it had to remove the three branches. It had to.
Yes. Yes.
So
World War III. World War III.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What you put just now, the
You
South,
sorry.
the glorious land, and Egypt, that's the seventh kingdom mission now, right?
Say that again. I was messing
Okay.
up.
Well, I'm sorry, just making sure I'm straight. So in order to become the seventh, it had to remove the three branches internally. But now that opens the way for it to go global, right? So it got the glorious land, and it's almost, I guess you could say, it's got the king of the south, and now it's going for the Egypt, which is all the countries, right, of the world.
Right. So modern Rome comes in two parts. The sixth and the seventh. And we see persecution here. So we see the wound healed.
I have a question, Elaine, when you're
Go ahead.
finished there. What is putting the restraint on the seventh head right now, Trump? Where the executive branch that he represents is just full bore with ruling.
In remembering going back to what Elder Tess taught, and that's another question, but I don't know if we'll make it there tonight. But going back to what Elder Tess did teach is that, like as Hitler and like as Putin, she says, was a dictator in 1999, and he worked his way through to get him to the place where he could be in power. So and then she said the same thing about Hitler. Hitler and all used, I don't know if I can say that about, well, yeah, because even Putin used, there was still voting, right? Some sort of democratic process. I don't know the extent of that, but Hitler, I do know because I've been reading that.
Because democracy is of the people. That's what we missed about this last election.
Yeah.
It's
So
not
Hitler,
about the Constitution, because they're repudiating, which means they're ignoring the Constitution altogether, but they're going along with voting still.
yes. So when you go back to Hitler, she says Hitler was always a dictator. He didn't just all of a sudden become a dictator. He was a dictator and taking those steps. Putin didn't just become a dictator all of a sudden. He was a dictator and using the steps necessary to get into the position of power. And so what she says about Trump is that he was a dictator at 2016, 2018, 19, 20. She goes on through, I don't remember which year she marks, but says that he's a dictator at each place. We know she marked 2019 for sure because that comes from the lines of the revolutions. And that he's less restrained at each place. So that's how I remember her teaching it. So I don't want to go into this. If anybody watches, if you watch Elder Terry's studies and then we meet again, either Friday or next Wednesday, then we can try to go to this discussion as well. But coming back to this one, Daniel 2 has 4 kingdoms. The 4th was going to be until the very end. It was going to be divided, and it would be come in 3 phases. Pagan Rome, which, as Marcia, I have some of that over here. Marcia pointed out that pagan Rome, why was pagan Rome taken out? Judged. These are trumpets, right? The first 4 trumpets that Marcia mentioned, those are the first 4 trumpets. Why did those first 4 trumpets come on pagan Rome?
They established Sunday law.
They established the Sunday law. And what about the papacy? They got the 6th and 7th trumpet on the first 2, which are the first 2 woes. Why?
Same reason, Sunday law.
Sunday law, 538. And so this one here makes a Sunday law, right?
Yes.
I'd say 20, I think we're safe to say 2024 at least. And it will have the 3rd woe, the kill part. Because we already saw the harbinger, which was the
hurt.
The hurt. Do anybody have any questions or comments on this?
One clarification, and I might have heard you wrong. Did you say that the 6th kingdom couldn't have been the king of the north? You said something like that.
I asked that because that's something that she's saying, and I'm not. I don't understand it, and I
Yeah,
don't.
that wouldn't make sense to me either.
And my reasoning behind that, because that's something that she's saying, and she was questioned. If you watch this 3 studies, she's questioned, and some good questions come up, and I had some other questions, and my question is, in Babylon, when Daniel gets taken captive to Babylon, right? Jerusalem is destroyed. Jerusalem gets the warning. And then Babylon comes in 3 waves. The 3rd wave, Jerusalem is destroyed. We have Daniel taken into captivity. I don't know how to ask the question. How does Nebuchadnezzar feel about Daniel? I think you're right, Troy. I think she said she got to ask some good questions. So how did Nebuchadnezzar feel about Daniel?
You liked him.
You liked him, right? Would you say he's highly favored? I think it actually says something like that. He's highly favored. Because that, I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Because of the interpretation of his dream?
Yeah.
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 Okay. Because the magicians, they couldn't do it.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if that was before or after. But Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, and yeah, all the wise men and all that can't figure out the dream because nobody has ever come and said, "Tell us the dream." You tell us the dream, we'll tell you the interpretation, but nobody can tell us what your dream was. And Daniel is able to tell him what the dream is and the interpretation. So he winds up being highly favored in the kingdom. And then you come to chapter 5, I think. Is chapter 5 Belshazzar? I think. Come to Belshazzar, and he's defying God, everything that Babylon or that Nebuchadnezzar had learned through his life. And Daniel gives the prophecy, or they see the handwriting on the wall, and Daniel comes in, gets called in to interpret. And then you see that very night, Babylon's conquered by Medo-Persia, and you go into Daniel's now with the Medes and the Persians, and you go to, is chapter 6 the lion's den? I think.
Yes.
And what's his relationship with Darius?
Darius likes him too.
Darius liked him too. Is Babylon the king of the north?
They're all king of the north.
They're all king of the north. So is there a time, because Daniel is favored, God's people are favored, does that mean they're not the king of the north?
No.
Does anybody remember why? Okay, they're conquered, Jerusalem is conquered, and they're scattered. Well, they're scattered. We know that they're scattered. Does anybody remember? Oh, I know I've read it. I'm sure others have. What was the purpose of the scattering? There's probably several we can come up with, but there's one in particular I think I remember. Why does God scatter their people into Satan's kingdom?
I think one of them was for protection.
Wasn't it? That's how I remember it. Troy says for their own reproof. So it's a punishment, but also a protection. Is that right?
That's all right. I remember that. Yes.
I think. I mean, I don't want to. If I'm wrong, call me out on it. I don't know for sure, but that's how I'm remembering it. That it was also for a protection.
And that would be like when they're in Egypt as slaves under the king,
Under
Pharaoh.
Well, initially, yes, you're right. Initially, when Joseph goes there, he's well favored as well, right?
Yes.
And it's not until the other Pharaoh comes up, which I think as well is this period of time too, let my people go.
So it
Otherwise,
had a purpose to protect, but they also had to come out of that slavery mentality.
Yeah, I like the way Troy put it. No, otherwise they would destroy themselves. No remnant. There would be no remnant. I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
it actually says that. Maybe somebody remembers. I think we hear that there would be no one left. Something like that. I think that sounds familiar. So Medo-Persia, I think we all agree as well that he was in good favor. Daniel was, because when he was tricked, he's one of the top 3 governors right underneath Darius. Darius likes him, and those other ones tricked him, knowing that he would trick Darius into making a law that no one can pray to any of their gods but the king. And Darius goes ahead and signs it, puts a seal on it, and then they go and trick Daniel, and the whole thing was a setup, purposeful setup to set up Daniel. So Darius wants to save him from going to the lion's den, but he can't, because you can't change the law, if anybody remembers that story. So Daniel, though, is delivered. Okay, then you come into Greece and Rome. There's a lot of history in here, but Rome would be in 3 phases. But when you also get to modern Rome, you're going to see it in two parts, the sixth kingdom and the seventh kingdom. So the sixth kingdom, the question is the sixth kingdom the king of the north? And one of the things is said, and Troy, feel free to either speak up if you can or put in the chat if I have any of this wrong. Sounds like you've watched it. That what I'm getting out of this between what Curtis taught and what I heard in these studies is that it looks, or I believe what I'm hearing is being said is that the Republican Party, the fall of the Republican Party is the fall of Babylon. That's how I'm kind of interpreting, and I might be wrong, but I feel like there's a
I don't get that. How
huh?
could that be the fall of Babylon? You mean the purging of the Republican Party?
Well, let me just try to finish this thought real quick. That because the discussion with Curtis that we had on Sabbath, um, I understood that, and I might be wrong. I understood him to be basically giving the left a pass. Is that how anybody else interpreted it? That the fall of the Republican Party is basically the fall of Babylon, and that and he kind of seemed to leave the left out of that. Is that how anybody else understood it?
That the liberals had nothing to do with it?
I don't think he was saying that the liberals had nothing to do with it. I didn't get
I'd love to hear
I
your
don't
thoughts
either.
because okay.
Yeah,
Um,
Troy brings up a point, gatekeeper. Because he did say they had, each party has gatekeepers, right?
yes. Yes.
So they failed in that sense.
Yes, I agree. They failed. I agree they failed.
You
So
said Susan's saying that the liberals failed because they weren't true gatekeepers. They weren't watchful.
The Republicans
standing up.
also failed because they weren't able to hold back the tide of what was happening within the party. And they liked some of the things that were happening, which made them, they liked the benefits. They didn't want to lose their constituencies,
Mm-hmm.
wanted to keep their pocketbooks filled. So some of them went along with some of the stuff, right, for their own self-interest.
I do like Sarah's question in this part of the discussion. How can it be a fall when it's rising? That's just another thing to think about. So when 1798 comes, you have the beginning of the sixth head. Is the sixth head still the king of the north? When you look at this statue, and I don't have the answer. I have my thoughts, but I'm not going to, I don't have the answer.
I think
Is there any time where this statue, any part of this statue, is not the king of the north?
I would say no, because that's what even our message began on at the beginning was the unfolding of Daniel and the king of the north and the king of the south and the pushing and all of that, right? The battle. So how could the sixth kingdom not be a part of the king of the north?
But say if you watch her studies, try to hear the arguments that she's, that I don't mean arguments like fighting, that she's offering, and then some of the questions, and then I'm sure she'll continue because I did give her some of my questions on that question as well. So I plan to watch whatever she does next to see where she goes with that, because as Troy put in the chat earlier, that she's is wanting to relook at that. So okay, so then you have these kingdoms, whether they're all king of the north. I think they are. I'll just say I think they are. But I'm going to watch and see how it continues to develop. You have all these kingdoms. Daniel's favored. I don't know if we know much about here. We do, but I don't want to go there right now. But then you have Rome in these three phases. Now you have a law that comes because here they were free somewhat to live how they live. Is that correct? Until like here when the ones tricked Darius into making a law, they were still free to worship how they wanted. And if you go back to Cyrus at the beginning, Cyrus the Great, which a lot of the evangelicals say that Trump is that Cyrus the Great. But what Cyrus the Great actually did was freed the slaves, ended discrimination, and brought in freedom of religion. You were free to worship however you wanted. So they had the freedom to worship, even though they were not in their land, they could worship how they wanted. So what happened here?
They made a Sunday law. The decree went forth that you had to worship on Sunday.
Now you can't worship according to your own conscience. Is that how you just said it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so they were forced.
Yeah, they were forced. And the papacy does the same. What happens?
Yeah, same thing. They were forced, and those who did not comply got persecuted.
So now you got this reprieve in here, this period of time here, where there's not that force. That force has been lifted, and you're free now to worship. If you were free to worship with according to your conscience, here, here, and here, and then you get to Rome, and you're not free. You're not free. And then they come to the United States.
But Rome did have that Pax Romana, that time of freedom and peace.
Yes, yes, yes. And I think that was before 321. I think that was, if I remember right.
Christ came during that time.
But it was before that because all the roads were there. This was early on because all the roads were there. And I remember Elder Tess making the point, plus we did it in a study talking about it too, that all the roads, there was 200 years that went on that where all these roads were put in, and if those roads were not put in, that's what made the way for Paul to be able to travel. So that was all before here. Right?
Before 321
Right.
AD?
It was in the time of Paul.
Yes,
Yes, that's
I
correct.
agree with that.
Or prior to Paul. Because that was the time where it talks about they were building, and she did that study on communications and such.
321? Is that AD? I mean
Yeah, that's
BC?
AD. Yeah, that's AD. Sorry. Yeah. 321. Constantine.
Yeah, but that was long after Paul.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So early on in Rome, they had that freedom. And that's a whole nother story to look at. I just want to focus on the kingdoms because you got the time of Paul and all that's going on in Rome, calling on Caesar and all of that. So when modern Rome is in that first part, I'm just going to say I don't understand how it can be any different than up here. When you're under the king of the north, but you don't have any oppressive laws, and you're free to, right?
Yeah, I have not watched her recent, the most recent ones. But I do remember her logic. She didn't explain it, but she did put out the King of the North. I think she just kind of mentioned it in one of her previous studies. And I think the reasoning was because King of the North is just more than an institution. It's the behavior. So the Sixth Kingdom did not persecute. It was a lamb-like beast. And so the king of the north, I think the king of the north has a certain behavior, and that behavior is persecution when he becomes a dragon. So I think when it becomes a dragon, the seventh kingdom, that's when it becomes the king of the north. I think.
You're
Is that
right. That is. You're right. You're reminding me that that is what she is saying. Is that up until Sunday law, it's a lamb-like beast, and therefore it's not the sixth. The sixth head is not the sixth kingdom is not the king of the north.
That would, though, undo everything we've understood. I can see if it's another level or another context, but not to completely outrule what based us from 1989.
I think yeah, that's a good point, because that's one of the questions that comes up, and I don't remember the specific question. Maybe Troy does, but somebody's asking the question about, well, because when you look at Daniel 11:40, who's fighting?
Yeah, it's the king of the north and the king of the south. That's what I'm saying. Maybe this is a different context that she's approaching this. I mean, I can see the reasoning, but I can't see it for that context, of Daniel 11.
Yeah, maybe it's a difficult concept, but only thing I can think of right now is the separation between the institution and the fall of the institution. Because the institution was a lamb-like beast that did not persecute, and now you have a dragon-like beast that does persecute. So maybe there are two different. We're looking at two different things or two different concepts,
Yeah, that's
or
what I'm
or
thinking.
two different contexts.
Yeah. That's the only way I can settle it in my mind for the moment.
Well, let's leave that discussion where it's at then. And we don't know. We're waiting and I'll watch for if how she answers some of my questions. And I didn't ask her to answer me personally. I just said I'd watch her studies to see. I think we all have the same goal here, is victory at the end. So to me, if it's explained out in the logic and through the methodology, which I admit I'm weak on, but if it comes to where light dispels all the darkness, I'm going with the light. Go ahead, Troy.
Thank you, Elaine. All right. What I do remember from her questionnaire study, the third study that she did on Sabbath last, the 15th, while answering the question, she paused. I remember that. And then it's like she was pondering about Daniel 11:40. And then she said, yes, the sixth kingdom is, because they had to do that job, because Trump would definitely wouldn't do that job. So the sixth kingdom, yes, in perspective, is the king of the north, but she was trying to say something else about the Republicans.
Yeah.
So but then she also said that she had to think about it some more to answer the question correctly.
Yeah, that's what I heard. So I gave her my questions, and I admit I'm not strong. I'm very weak when it comes to the methodology. So to me, this is at least a simple overview, and I'm sure there's a lot more detail that could help us to understand whether or not the lamb-like.
The lamb-like for me came from the Constitution, and even the Constitution was written on lambskin. Look it up. It was written on lambskin parchment paper. and I think about the principles in the Constitution and what it was meant to do. And now that they are repudiating it, meaning they are just ignoring it and, right, trampling upon its principles to persecute and become this dragon power. But I think the lamb-like part was we were a constitutional democracy, but we were also a republic. But a monarchy is the opposite of a republic. So we're no longer a republic because we have a king. And the Protestants are no longer Protestant because they have clasped hands with the papal powers, so to speak, because their doctrine is papal doctrine, that Babylonian doctrine. They believe like the papacy.
But even if you take, because we need to always remember that it's not religion and church and state, it's culture and state.
Yes, because patriarchy runs throughout it all.
Yeah. So I don't even see the papacy involved.
But you do in the persecution, the way it spoke like a dragon and all that. That's what the image of the beast is.
This one does what this one did.
Yeah, you're paying homage.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, you pay homage. This one pays homage through hatred.
Yeah.
This one does what that one did.
But I'm saying the same thing. If maybe you're not, maybe I'm not saying it the way you.
I might have missed it.
Yeah, I'm saying the same thing.
Okay. Yeah, because I got a lot of thoughts going. Because you also said something that, oh, king, that's what it was. So I got sidetracked.
Yeah, about the republic, because a republic is voting, is also has to do with voting of the people, but it's the opposite of a monarchy. If you have a monarchy, you don't have a republic.
So let's jump over here just for the last few minutes we have. When it comes to a king, what is a king? It's a monarchy. What is a king?
Dictator.
A dictator. So I have a lot of questions, and these are some of the ones that I messaged her, because I can't remember if she said this, maybe Troy would, if she said this directly, or if I've heard others say it. But at the RNC that they crowned their king.
Yeah.
Troy, did she say that, or did somebody else say that?
I didn't know.
I believe both.
I don't know.
Oh,
Didn't
sorry.
she have
Phil.
an article, because that one, I can't think of that young man's name that taught for us.
Curtis?
No, not Curtis. Further back when her studies were just hitting and we were having speakers come. He was a young man, I can't think of his name. And he had us read some articles because he also was promoting her message of the Republican Party and crowning Trump king.
I think that eraser behind my head erased that part, so I can't remember who you're talking about.
He had fair hair.
Sarah says Brandon. Was it Brandon you're talking about?
It doesn't sound right.
I think it's Brendan.
No, that doesn't sound right.
He's from Australia. Brendan is from Australia.
Fair skinned, fair haired. No, not Aryan.
Ariane didn't teach here.
He was a speaker.
Somebody that taught here,
Sabbath
right?
morning, and it was before the girl that did on the she's a interpreter for France with the long dark hair and glasses. He was the week before. Yes, he was like the week before Elisa.
But
I'm not remembering myself either.
did Vadim ever teach?
Who?
Vadim?
No, that doesn't sound right.
Vadim, no. He's never taught here.
No, okay.
But The young man
Marcel did.
had us read
Marcel
New
did.
York. Sorry.
Marcel did, but I don't think you're talking
Yeah.
about Marcel.
I think it was Marcel. What's it? Yeah. And he had us read the New York Times article about the crowning of Trump.
Oh, okay. Was it Marcel? Oh, you muted.
What did you ask?
Was it Marcel? I don't remember
I
what.
think that was his name, yes.
Okay.
He's a fair-haired, fair-skinned.
Dark hair.
I think of him as fairer hair.
He speaks English but has an accent.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it was him.
Okay. So if we're looking at crowning a king, is a king a dictator? Because I'll just go ahead and say it right out. What she says, what she's saying is that Trump is not a dictator yet. So I have questions on that. And
Meaning now? Meaning
Huh?
meaning he's still not a dictator?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have some references here if anybody wants to do these reviews. For one, the revolutions. I know you can find that, I think, in Guadeloupe, the Brazil School of the Prophets, probably elsewhere. So for sure, the Brazil School of the Prophets, there was like 4 studies to break down the revolutions. And then the other one, this was in Kenya, December 27th, 2019, called the First Republican Party. Might have had something else to that title. I might not have got all the. I don't remember if there was more to that title and I missed it. And then also, I think it said this was Kenya as well, but it was in Africa somewhere. Divine Right of Kings. It was January. I'm pretty sure it was January 2nd, 2020. Either that's February 1st. I wrote it the way I thought it was because they always write them reversed, but I could be wrong. They maybe wrote it the way we do. So it was either January 2nd or it was February 1st, but I think it was January 2nd.
So,
So-
Elaine, how could Trump not be a dictator if we've already said even Elder Test said he was a dictator way back when?
I don't know if something comes to bring more clarity to the message.
Yeah.
Then
Well, I think prophetically speaking, he is a dictator because that's what we know.
Yeah.
Why?
But constitutionally, he's not because the Constitution has not yet fallen. People are still saying the Constitution is holding because there are judges, there are attorney generals who are holding him in check. Once he ignores all that, then the Constitution is no longer applicable, and then he'll become a full dictator.
So
Yeah, that makes sense what you're
like
saying.
so like he like Elder Tess had said that he and Hitler and Putin, they're always dictators. They don't just suddenly become a dictator, but they're working their way towards that full power.
Yes.
Okay. So that might be the answer to that one. The simple answer, but I'm sure it's more complex than that.
But some of these things, oh, excuse me, will
Go ahead,
push,
Jackie.
yeah, we'll push it to the Supreme Court over some of these issues. And then, of course, we know that, there's more Republicans than there are liberals. And
You know what I was thinking about
we
there?
even count on that as holding it back, with
Yeah,
with
'cause
the
I
number
read
on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I've read some articles on them that they draw the line at protecting. Let me see if I can find, I think I can find, if anybody read the, John Roberts did a report, end of year report. I'm pretty sure I know where I put that so I can pull it up quickly.
Yeah, I've heard what you just said, Elaine, too, whether or not, it would hold true that they're going to support Trump completely.
Then the question comes, because I've seen articles saying, is he going to defy the courts? What happens? Okay, so this is the very end of his statement that he makes at the end of the year. and then he does like other stuff talking about different cases and stuff. So the federal courts must do their part to preserve the public's confidence in our institutions. We judges must stay in our assigned areas of responsibility and do our level best to handle those responsibilities fairly. We do so by confining ourselves to live cases to live cases. I thought we said we do so by confining ourselves to live cases or controversies and maintaining a healthy respect for the work of elected officials on behalf of the people they represent. I'm confident that the judges in Article 3 and the corresponding officials in the other branches will faithfully discharge their duties with an eye toward achieving the successful cooperation essential to our nation's continued success.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I've read, like I said, a few articles that are talking about are the courts going to uphold? Is he going to defy the courts?
And what is Robert's definition for institutions being upheld? You know,
I've seen some other articles that talk about them, some of them speaking that seem to suggest that they will stand by, even though they interpret things different, they would stand up to some of what is happening. And I wish I saved, I probably have, and I don't remember where they're at. But anyways, it's something to look at, is how the courts are handling things, because he's fighting the courts. Go ahead, Troy.
Yeah, I see covert in our time, especially our dispensation. I see covert deception more effective. Going back to Elder Terry's logic, I'm not sure if I'm correct. I'm not sure if she's correct, but the way I interpret what she's saying, that she's probably using the line of progression, where we at. So we know that democracy surely not going to look like in the Hitler's time. We have to see that progression and deception, covert. So the people would, it would be more effective. Everybody going along, okay, voting is still taking place. So all this everybody who's saying that democracy has fallen, it's not true, because you still have fair elections.
Yeah.
That's the mindset. But it's happening covertly, where, of course, democracy has been hijacked. We know that. But it doesn't look the same. It's not so easily seen, because it's God's purpose for democracy. That's God's will. So Satan is not going to disrupt that. It's just going to be hijacked. And just like in the beginning in Genesis, just change one word.
Used for their purpose.
Right.
Amen. I agree with that. It's got to be a deception. You
said a word, Troy, that made me think of this other passage that I wanted to go at. And this is in that same document that we're reading, but it's going, like I said, verse by verse. But he shall scatter among them the prey. It's talking about Rome. Rome is said to have done more toward the conquest of the world by her policy and craftiness than by her arms. I thought that was interesting when
that's kind of what Lucifer did, because Lucifer worked within the government, God's government, but he was very deceptive.
Yeah.
And crafty. But he still worked within the government to seed all that disinformation and lies.
Amen. Yep.
So I had something else, but I erased it to put that mark of the beast in there. So we have just a few minutes left. The 4 winds are what come at the close of probation, right? What are the 4 winds? Simple answer.
World War III? Hot war?
Yeah, but that's not quite the really simple and basic. If they're the four winds of heaven, where do they come from? The four corners. What are the four corners? Do I have that answer? What are the four corners of the earth? When they use that phrase, what do they mean?
What, east, west, north, south?
Right, right. I told you it was really basic. I'm gonna snag a picture of this real quick, so I'm gonna erase something real quick, just in case anybody wanted this. I think that covers what we just did. I don't know if anybody else has this problem on their phone where sometimes I take pictures and they are not in my photos. So I'm going to check to make sure it's there. Oh, good, it's there. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to erase something and go back in here. So you have the four corners. Which one do we want to erase? Let's erase this for now. We didn't go here. I got a picture of it so we can go back to that. Just the question on whether or not Egypt is the king of the south, or is Egypt the world, or is it both? Okay, so you have the four winds. This would just be a brief thought, anyways. And they come at the close of probation, or in that time of trouble, right? Jacob's time of trouble. And so you have north, south, east, and west. I think we're pretty sure we know what this one is, and Susan already answered it. The angry horse. Okay. So here's some of my thoughts. And I thought because I'm gonna be doing my Islam study again soon, probably, to go back through that and try to continue to build it. You can see that now. Okay, so you've got north, south, east, and west. East being the angry horse, we know that. So when you go back, tracing the history of Islam, you can see Islam involved. You see the east wind, let's put it that way. You can see the east wind in the issue. So we've got the Ottoman Empire and you've got Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia never actually joined the Ottoman Empire. So, and Saudi Arabia came in three kingdoms. They were first established in the mid 1700s, somewhere in there. And that's where Ibn Saud made an alliance as well with Wahhabi, who was such a radical fundamentalist that he got kicked out of where he was living. And I want to say he was among the Ottoman Empire, somewhere within that, but I might be wrong. I need to review that. But anyways, he goes with Ibn Saud says, hey, come be with me and you can be here. So you've got this alliance that begins with the Wahhabis way back with Wahhabism and Saudi Arabia, the first kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The second kingdom of Saudi Arabia takes place during if I don't have my dates in front of me, but like the Millerite history, somewhere in there where it's set up. It might have been later in that history. I can't remember. So it's set up. But then the third history, as Elder Tess pointed out, was 1932. The third kingdom of Saudi Arabia is established. And it's just a few years later after that they bring in a U.S. geologist. Is that what, I don't know what the title is, maybe something like that, but a surveyor, something like that. But in search of oil. So with the U.S. help, they find oil. That kind of changes their whole lifestyle. And they've got this alliance with the Wahhabis, right? And so how are the Wahhabis going to feel about this change in lifestyle? So as Elder Tess points out, they, in order to become more legitimate, in the 70s or so is when they start opening up all these religious schools and teaching Wahhabism in the schools, the very strict Wahhabism in the schools. And this goes on in various places, not just Saudi Arabia. And that's what was going on in Pakistan as well. And that's what actually brought you, when you come to the point of the Soviet-Afghan war, that's who's there fighting a lot of these fundamentalists and becomes eventually Al-Qaeda. So you can see this, trace this history of the East Wind all the way through. And then when you come to where we're at now, you have in going into 1989, the end of the King of the North and the King of the South, the battle, the collapse of the wall. It is said that it was that Soviet-Afghan war that was the major cause of the collapse of the Soviet Union, and that involved Afghanistan. So when you keep going forward out of that, in 1988, Al-Qaeda is formed by bin Laden, and there's a total of 15 of them called the Base, and they were what was happening in Afghanistan during this time and prior to 79 is a civil war, because communism had been trying to move in there for some time. I got to back up. Well, I don't want to give it all, so we're just going to look at how we get to the East Wind. We know the East Wind. So I'm going to talk current instead of some of the past stuff. So in 2021, the Taliban takes over again. So in March, I'll lay more of that out in detail. So 2021, you have the Taliban taking over again. And if you look at the history of what was going on in the previous 2 years, where you have Trump who makes a peace treaty, then he breaks it. That's all right after al-Baghdadi is killed. He makes a peace treaty with the Taliban. Then he breaks it because the Taliban was still doing things that they weren't supposed to be doing. And so when you get to the 2021, just before Biden goes through the inauguration, is when Trump sets him up for having to bring the troops home. And Biden does it. But if you look at that history, the couple of years before, you'll see that the Taliban had a good part of a control already over Afghanistan. And the troops leaving was the straw that broke the camel's back. So, and then when you have Syria collapses, it's an ally of Russia or a proxy of Russia, and the whole thing collapses. You've got Iran, Syria, all of those. I believe Aaron listed them out. Hezbollah, Hamas, all of it collapses. So Russia doesn't have anything. So my main point that I'm trying to get at, sorry, I'm all wound up on this one, we're all over the place. My main point is that when you had the Cold War taking place, just before the Cold War, you have FDR make an agreement with Saudi Arabia to protect Saudi Arabia in exchange for oil. So now you've got the Cold War, and you have two superpowers vying for unilateral power. The King of the North and the King of the South during the Cold War. So the King of the North has already got a foothold in the Middle East. What's the King of the South going to want to do?
It's the same.
The same.
The same, right? So he pushes into Afghanistan, and this was going on. This is again out of my poor memory, but in the 50s, I think, as far back as the 50s, might have been the 60s, I can't remember. But they were trying to get communism spread into Afghanistan. And enough to the point to where then a communist government got set up, and all of this was causing civil war in Afghanistan because you had those that wanted it, and then you had these fundamentalists of many different factions of fundamentalists that were against it. So you had civil war, but when the Soviet Union thought that they had, I hope I say all this right, but I don't want to tell the story wrong. There's probably people that can tell it way better than I can. But the Soviet Union, when they think that they have the right opportunity, they go in to Afghanistan and they expected to be there 6 months. And it was 10 years, and it was called the Vietnam of the Soviet Union. wasted war, lost lives, lots of money, and they lose. And in 1988, it says that Al-Qaeda starts to then turn to its other enemy. What's its other enemy? The United States, right? The angry horse is against everyone, and everyone's against the angry horse. So they start to turn towards their other enemy, and that other enemy is the one that funded them $8 million or $8 billion, I think it's $8 billion, to defeat the Soviet Union, along with Saudi Arabia and others. So, but that was the fundamentalist one. So you had those fundamentalist ones who did not agree on everything. The one thing they did agree on was they were against communism. And so they have this little bit of trying to unite, but they really struggle after Afghanistan, after the Soviet Union leaves. They try to unite and they struggle. Al-Qaeda is formed out of that. The Taliban is actually formed from those fundamentalists, and I think from the Wahhabis, if I remember right from reading. So you have that history there, and then you come back and you have Afghanistan again in 2021, back in power. Syria collapses. Russia's lost all its sphere of influence. I think my main point I want to say is you have the USA, you have Russia, and then you have the Middle East. And the Middle East is angry at everyone, right? And Russia loses its proxies. The United States still has proxies there. But the King of the South we know is dead when it comes to proxies. So what's the issue with Ukraine? If it's a proxy war between the King of the North and the King of the South, and that's over the Middle East, what's the issue with Ukraine? Anybody? In looking at the four winds. What's Trump trying to do right now with Putin?
Make peace.
Okay, he's trying to make peace with Putin. What's he doing that doesn't seem right?
He's
Excluding,
rejecting anything about Ukraine, about Zelensky and all that the US has done there, plus, NATO working as well.
What were you going to say, Phil?
I think he's dividing Ukraine.
He's also blaming Ukraine for starting
Yes.
the
Yeah.
So when he meets with Putin, this is an issue. This is an issue over Ukraine. And Ukraine had wanted to be a part of NATO. They want that protection. Russia
Yeah.
doesn't want Ukraine to be part of NATO because it's right on the border of Russia, and they want some cushion between them and NATO. So who's, NATO all made up of? Roughly.
The West.
Yeah.
European countries.
So you have the angry horse. You have the King of the North, who's making a deal with the King of the South, and he's leaving out Ukraine or NATO or Europe. I don't know what we would put here for sure. I'm just trying to look at the four winds, what they might be. So because the four winds are let loose, this one is coming after this one, and this one is making this one mad, and Ukraine. Do you see that?
Yes.
Yes, I see that.
Just another thought, and this is just a side thought. What we have to understand is that Vladimir Putin saved Donald Trump in the 1980s by the Russian mafia when Donald Trump was going through his bankruptcies, and he had a total of 6. and they went into the early 2000s too. He couldn't borrow any money from any of the banks. Nobody would lend him anything because he was just a terrible businessman, and they knew that if they gave him money, they'd never see it again. The only people willing to give him money was the Russian mafia. And who is in control of the Russian mafia? Vladimir Putin. So Donald Trump has an IOU with Putin.
So that's in the details. Yes.
The details, yeah.
We
This is
included
the side details. So that's what we have to keep in mind. He's always going to favor Putin because he owes Putin.
So what Sarah says is Europe now sees the USA as an adversary. Yes. And Trump is saying that Zelensky started that war. So how is he feeling about Trump right now? So can you see the big picture of World War III happening?
Yeah.
The four winds?
Mm-hmm.
Because by going to Putin to make this deal that doesn't even include the country it affects and the ones around it that are all part of defending Ukraine, he's making everybody angry.
That's why Vladimir Putin fought and did all kinds of things to get Donald Trump to become president of the United States. Lots of fraud, lots of voter interference. He was a big part of Donald Trump becoming president. Okay. So Donald Trump owes a lot to Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories about him in Russia that are all there. We got to close here though. But this is just, we already kind of went through this, but it's just real quick. And if you want, I'll send a picture of it again into the chart, into the forum, and then we'll go through it again. But yeah, I'll just take a picture of it instead of go through it because we're out of time. But I just kind of wanted to touch on my thoughts because it's more of a big picture. You know what I mean? And as Dawn is pointing out, there's details to be dug out to see it. But what we can see at least is while Trump is the bully, he doesn't have all the power yet, but he's making a lot of people angry. And we know that it's at the close of probation or in Jacob's time of trouble where the four winds are let loose. And I was always, we tend to, I don't think I'm alone in this, but maybe some of you saw bigger than I did, but always kind of associated the four winds with just the east wind. And it's like, well, that's only one wind. There's four winds. There's the north, south, east, and west. And that's what made me think about this because, I've turned it over. Because when it comes to the Middle East, the proxy war was about the Middle East, not about Ukraine. Because I think somebody's actually teaching that when Trump makes a peace deal with Putin, that somehow is, I hope I said this right, that somehow is the death of the king of the South, but that's not really a death if you're going to make a peace deal and you're going to give. But to me, that's not even the proxy war because the proxy war is over the Middle East. And when it comes to the Middle East and that proxy war, the king of the South has lost its spheres of influence in the Middle East. And I think, just my thoughts, I think Ukraine is a different matter. And Ukraine, he's now getting Europe, as Sarah put it, as an adversary. Ukraine as an adversary. So you're going to have all war break loose. Yeah, I don't think that is it, Susan. I don't think that's it. I think maybe I've thought it that way before, that it's the east wind or the Inger horse comes from all four corners. But I don't think that anymore, especially now that you're looking at what's happening when it comes to NATO, Europe, And I don't know if anybody saw J.D. Vance's speech in Munich, saying that talking about Germany, how they need, of all places too, Germany, that they need to stop having being a firewall, or I don't remember how he said it, but take down the firewall and stop blocking these far right parties from being able to be in elections. Who was Hitler in Germany? What party was he from?
Far right.
The far right, right?
Yeah,
So, if
exactly.
you're a German, and this was in Munich, you're a German and you're there, or you're seeing this on the news, or anybody else even seeing this on the news. He's saying that Germany should not be acting like a firewall to block the far right from having their space in elections.
Exactly. Because he's on the same side. It's the far right.
Crazy.
Just stirring up more there because there are elections in another week in Germany.
Yeah.
It's such a white supremacist. I mean, it's just so clear, their agenda, that even the Europeans are just flabbergasted. And then they're like, you're telling us about how to have democracy after what's gone on in your country. I mean, it's a slap in the face. It's just unbelievable. They just can't believe it, that they got the audacity to say the thing, the Hegseth and all that others. And the plans, what they write about is they want to take up the world and they want to divide it. And Putin will have the European part of the world. He'll be in charge of that area. And the United States will be in charge of, they call it the transatlantic, where it's from Mexico all the way up to Canada and up to Greenland. They want that whole piece of area for transatlantic thing. So they want to divide it. They're already looking world, like world domination. And they have their people. And China, of course, will be in charge of the Asia area. So they already have their plans, what they want. Whether they get there or not, who knows? But that's what their plans are.
I think the idea is to divide and conquer.
Yeah,
division and conquer.
All their dictators set up in the areas that they need them to be.
So we did see that the King of the North defeats the King of the South, defeats the Glorious Land, and then will defeat the world. So I thank everybody for your participation. I don't know that any of us have answers, but I appreciate the discussion. And I hope I didn't come across as criticism. I wasn't trying to, because if somebody's going to show me how some of these answers are brought, to develop these answers, all I want is victory. And want to follow wherever the light leads.
You were great, Elaine. You weren't offensive or anything. We're all curious. We all have questions. We all want to know. So you don't know unless you ask, right?
Yeah. So, well, thank you for that. Donna or Christine, go ahead. You had a question?
Just one quick thing. I'm not sure if everybody noticed it, but in the media broadcast, when Elder Hermander wrote about the Sunday laws, all the studies that are coming out from the 5 presenters, Elder Terry, Arian, Curtis, Aaron, and Elena. Elder Parmenter said, and I quote, "It is your personal responsibility to be educated on these different views and keep abreast of the developing Sunday law message. So it's our responsibility to make sure we understand all of these different views."
Yeah. Yep. Thank you. It's a lot to watch. Like I said, I know I won't watch every one of them. I'm definitely going to keep up on Terry's, and we're going to have each speaker come through here as well. So we'll get to hear each one personally. Good night, Sarah. We'll have each one of them here personally as well. So Terry will be coming here too. I don't remember where. Not until April. So, but thank you for all your participation. And I was going to ask if Christine would like to close in prayer.
Sure. Dear Heavenly God, we thank you for drawing us all here together. We thank you for, oh, well, I got a cramp, hold on. We thank you for teaching us these new truths. We pray that you will give us an open heart and an open mind to be able to be corrected, to be able to follow the truth, not be stubborn and set in our way of thinking. No matter who's teaching, there could be good information and there could be mistakes. But we pray that all of us will be able to come into unity together with your truth, with the truth that you're teaching us, and help us to understand how it all comes together as we zoom in closer and closer to this information and closer to the end. We just pray that we have an open heart and open mind, Lord, because we want to be in your kingdom. We want to have your character. We want to love the neighbors that we have around us and everyone we come in contact with. We want to be forgiving and loving and caring and using our slow brain as we go through each and every day, each and every contact with another person, building on our relationships around us, that we may have a good relationship with you. We thank you, Lord, for all your gifts and all your blessings. And we pray all this in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.